Welcome to the 10-day trend that takes us up to the Easter weekend. We'll start with the bigger picture and what's going on high up in the atmosphere with the jet stream, that fast-moving ribbon of air that is to the south of the UK and reasonably flat across the Atlantic at the moment. But if we fast forward to Sunday, it's changed quite a bit in shape. We've got one of these big dips, a big trough. The jet stream has become more amplified over the next 4 or 5 days, and that will have an impact on our weather. It means things will become a little more slow moving. But certainly for the time being, if we bring it back to the here and now, that southern track to the jet stream and the fact that it's fairly flat is keeping our weather patterns reasonably active. And just want to draw your attention to this darker purple colour here. That's a bit of an intensification of the jet stream, and that is going to track across the Atlantic over the next 48 hours. Why is that important? Well, because that is likely to develop and intensify an area of low pressure that it will shift on this track down just to the south of the country and head into northern France. In fact, let's rewind the clock and show you that area of low pressure. So just ahead of this intensification of the jet, and that's what spins this up into quite an intense area of low pressure. The development happens out in the Atlantic, but then it does push its way in across southern parts of the UK with the strongest winds, the most tightly packed isobars there on its southern flank barreling into northern France and across the Channel Isles. Now, this is 48 hours ahead from time of recording, but it's not set in stone, the exact track of this low. It's got to develop, it's got to intensify, and the exact interaction with the jet stream will be key. So it might not be in exactly this position, and if we run the computer models many times, they're actually suggesting it might just be a little bit further north. Now, this is what we call a Dalmatian plot. You can just about see the UK there, and when we run the models many times in what's called an ensemble forecast, each of these little blue dots represents a position of that low pressure at midday on Friday. If we just zoom in a little bit, you might get a closer idea that actually there are more of the models suggesting that low is a little bit further north than they are to the south of the main model run, which is the yellow dot. And that's important because the strongest winds are on the southern flank. So although it's not a huge difference, but a shift of 50 or 70 miles further north means there's a greater chance of these stronger winds affecting more southern parts of England and Wales as that shimmies across the country on Thursday night and into Friday morning. So some gusty conditions certainly likely across the south during, say, Thursday night and first thing on Friday. That low, though, will shift its way out towards the near continent, and behind it things will start to just calm down a little bit after what's been a pretty lively week with spells of wet and windy weather swinging in. As the low clears away, the winds will start to shift, particularly in the east, to more of an easterly wind, and that at this time of year increases the chances of a lot of low cloud drifting in from the North Sea, which is at its coldest at this time of year. So an increasing chance of seeing murky conditions on the east coast, Har or Fret, for example, during Friday and into Saturday. After that, however, if we look out west, there's a little ridge of high pressure just starting to topple in. There are old weather fronts lying around, which means it's not going to be a completely dry weekend, but that ridge of high pressure and the switch in the position of the jet stream adds up to things turning a bit drier through the weekend, because by this stage we've got that dip in the jet stream out west, and that's keeping these low pressure systems out here rather than pushing them right across the UK. So we will start to see that shift to more slow-moving weather patterns and things through the course of the weekend turning drier. Now, I'm emphasising drier, not going to be a completely dry weekend because there will be those old weather fronts providing some showery rain. And with that easterly breeze, certainly in the east, it will feel a bit colder with the winds coming in from the North Sea, because although there'll be further showers over the next few days, it will be reasonably mild still, but it will turn a little colder through the weekend, and the winds will be that much lighter too, particularly across parts of the south. What about into next week? Well, we start, of course, with that kink in the jet stream, that amplified jet stream and the low pressure systems out west. But what happens is actually the jet kind of cuts off this low down to the south and starts to re-establish itself as a westerly and builds up this fight between low pressure and the high pressure sitting out to the east. And that's the scenario as we go into Monday and Tuesday. These weather fronts are likely to bring some cloud and rain in from the west, whereas high pressure is likely to dominate further east. And actually this pressure setup is likely to continue for much of next week. And that's what we're looking at here when we run all the computer models many times and get our different flavors of weather, where blue is more mobile weather patterns, more active weather patterns, dominating for the next few days with those lows coming in from the Atlantic. But then the reds really take over as we go through the weekend and into next week, with these lighter orangey reds suggesting that actually that area of high pressure over Scandinavia will dominate, before these darker reds, which don't necessarily mean high pressure will be in control. It just means the weather patterns are more likely to be blocked, and a much higher percentage of those dominating through much of the second half of next week, suggesting those slower moving weather patterns are going to become more dominant and stick around, in fact, for most of next week and even towards the Easter weekend. Now, if we look at whether low or high pressure is more likely, then there's a strong signal here that high pressure will dominate through next week, with the dates going along the top there, previous computer model runs down the side here. Blue is low pressure, red is high pressure, and that strong signal for that switch over. Yes, low pressure dominating through the rest of this week, but a switch through the weekend with the reds taking over for much of next week. They get a little paler as we head towards the Easter weekends, but nevertheless, the most likely scenario through next week is that continuation of higher pressure up to the northeast, perhaps a little more dominant than these low pressure systems down to the southwest. So as we head towards the Easter weekend, that's what we're most likely to see, with the driest weather close to that high pressure across northern and eastern parts. We are still likely to see some low pressure systems coming in from the Atlantic, bringing wetter weather at times, meaning the more frequent rain is likely down towards the south and the west. Temperatures, well, hard to say anything other than likely to be close to average, except, of course, the fact that this time of year, if you do get some sunshine, then temperatures will be rising quite nicely because the sun is gaining power at this time of year. But the nights are still long enough, so if you're close to that area of high pressure under clear skies at night, that the nights could still be pretty chilly. So still the likely threat of nighttime frosts. As always, as we get closer to the time, we'll be adding more and more details. So if you've got plans for the Easter holidays, school holidays, or indeed the long Easter weekend, then make sure you stay up to date for the day-to-day details. And the best way to do that, of course, is to make sure you're following us right across social media.